In this tutorial, you're going to learn about the basics of HTMX and how to use it in Spring. Now, we're going to do this by talking about it a little bit at a high level, and then we're going to dive into some examples and learn about some of the fundamentals of HTMX. Now, I've been writing code for as long as I remember, back since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And when I got started and you wanted to build dynamic web applications, you would use something like PHP, ASP.NET, or a personal favorite of mine, Cold Fusion. Now with this approach, you make a request to the server, you do some type of dynamic capabilities, maybe you talk to a database, you pull in the information, and it would generate all the HTML needed and send that back in a single request. This worked for a while, but then we kind of moved on to the world of Web 2.0. And this is where jQuery really started to rise, right? Being able to make things like AJAX requests and just get like a certain set of data. Now, if you've ever worked with Spring MVC and one of the template engines like Thymeleaf, you know that this is a similar approach, right? You make a request to an endpoint, it renders a template. That template could get some information from the database, and it would return all of the HTML back to you. What if there was a way that inside of a template, you could make a request to the server, get a certain set of HTML, and return that back to the template without ever having to leave that template? Is that something you'd be interested in? I bet it would. That is the promise of HTMX, and that is what you are going to learn about today. So before we get started, I want to leave you with a couple resources. HTMX.org, really great place to start. Getting a quick start, how you can use it. There's a book, there's a whole bunch of sponsors. The one thing I like here is if you go into the examples, this is really how I got started. Here's a whole bunch of different examples, and I tried translating some of these into Spring and Thymeleaf, and some of them were easy, some of them were harder, but we're gonna go through a few of those today. So check out the examples. Check out the docs. So we're going to talk mainly about a few attributes today. We'll kind of build on this in further demos, further tutorials. But here's a good introduction. And then you want to look at things like AJAX triggers. So we're going to do an AJAX get, an AJAX post. Here are different ways to do that. There's different targets. So how do you want to target an element? There's also different ways of swapping things out. Do I want to swap the inner HTML, the outer HTML? Here are all the different ways that you can swap out information. So that's resource number one. Resource number two is going to be this GitHub repository, Hello HTMX. Now there is a main branch with a README that contains all the final source code for everything that we're going through. And there is a Start Here branch. So if you want to clone this repository and use the Start Here branch, you can fill in the necessary HTMX attributes to make these demos work. If you don't care about that, you can just download the main and get all of the final source code. So with that, if you do want to follow along, please clone this repository, open it up in your favorite IDE, and I will do that. I'm going to open it up in IntelliJ, and using the Start Here branch, we'll go through each of these demos and talk about some of the ways that we can add dynamic features to our applications. With that, let's write some code. All right, so we are in the application here in IntelliJ. Now remember, we are on the Start Here branch. If you want to jump over to the main branch, that will contain all of the final source code, all the answers, and I will go ahead and leave a link in the description below. I know we just saw it, but just in case you need it later. So we're going to go through these demos one by one. Again, I didn't want to type these out together because this would be a very, very long intro. And I want to get through more demos to kind of see more of the fundamentals. So our first demo, and again, if you go into the README, this kind of explains all of the different demos that we're going through. So the first demo, we have a message controller. Now we are adding the @controller annotation. That kind of signifies this as a Spring MVC controller. We're giving it a request mapping of /01. Then our get mapping, so the root of /01 is just to return the index template. So if we go into resources, templates, 01, we can see there's an index, and this is what returns kind of the template that we're going to display. So if we were to do this now, we would just see a div here that has a banner. and it has like a green background. And then it has a button, and you can click the button to load the banner content. Now, this doesn't work yet, but we'll get into that in just a second. There's another mapping to pull the banner fragment. So the banner fragment is here. This is the content that we are actually going to add to that banner. So we have this like green banner, but then we're going to have some text in it. So in this place, we have a default message and a default message. So there'll be like a title and a message. And actually this should say default title, right? So we have a default title and the default message, and then we have an X to kind of get rid of it if you want to, but that's not implemented. So let's walk through how this works. Now, again, none of this works right now, so we can even go ahead and run this application. And if we see that now we have this green bar, we have a button, but if we click it, nothing happens. So what we want to do is take a look at some of the HTMX attributes that allow us to add these dynamic capabilities. So we're going to come down here into our button, and I'll go ahead and add our first one, which is HXGet. So this is going to perform oops, we're not in there. So this is going to be an HXGet, and this is to perform a GET request to a particular endpoint. In this case, we are going to go to /01/banner. And again, that is from here. We have a mapping for that, so 01 banner. Here we're adding a couple attributes to the model, the title and the message. So Spring IO 2024. Join us in Barcelona, Spain from May 30th to the 31st. And we're returning a fragment, and that fragment is that banner. So that banner is here, and then we go ahead and add the title and the text, and this is using Thymeleaf. So what's important here, though, is when we make this request, we are not returning a full HTML page. We are returning just this fragment, just this little bit of HTML. Then what we want to say is, okay, where are we going to target that HTML? Where do we want to place that HTML in this document? So I'm going to say HX target, and that target is going to be banner. So the ID is banner. That's where we are going. Then there's some different modes of swapping. So we're going to say HX swap, and these are all really depending on how your HTML is set up. Do I want to swap it with the outer HTML, the inner HTML, before something, after something? There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can target how you're going to swap out the HTML. In this case, I'm saying I just want to go ahead and target the outer HTML. Okay, so with that in place, I think that's all we need. I'm going to go ahead and rerun our application. And we're going to open up this app here again. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the load banner content. And now you see what happened there. We got that text. More importantly, I'm going to go into the DevTools, and I'm going to look at the network here. Let me refresh this. Click on that. And if we look at banner, let me kind of make some more room here. You can see that all it's returning is the HTML from that banner.html, that fragment. So all we're doing is making a call to an endpoint, getting the HTML that we want, and swapping it out. We didn't have to reload the entire page. And so that is demo number 1. All right, so I'm here in the README, and we're going to take a look at demo number 2, which is loading a website dynamically without leaving the page. So we have our website loader controller. This takes a URL from a form and will dynamically return an iframe with that URL. Website.html fragment returns the iframe. So you type in a URL, you click load, and it will load here. So let's see how this works. So if we go into our number 2, again, we have our index, which just returns that template. So that template is the index. So if we look at index, again, I guess we didn't mention this in the first one, but this is a Thymeleaf template. We are including the HTMX script from the website. Now, in a production environment, we would probably go about this a little bit of a different way. And I'm including all of Tailwind. And again, I wouldn't do this in production, but for demo purposes, this works out best. So I have a form. Inside that form, I have a div. I have a URL. So we have some text here. You can type in a URL, and then we have a button to load. And then I have a div called with an ID of iframe container. This is where the iframe will load by HTMX. So from that, I also have a website .html fragment, and all this fragment it's called website. It has an iframe container. This is setting up the iframe with the source being the URL that we put in that input box. So let's take a look at how we can go ahead and make this work. What we're going to do at the form level, so let's come up here to the form. At the form level, we're going to say, I want to make this an HX post. And what we're going to post to is /o2 load URL. So let's take a look at o2 URL and load URL. So this is going to take in a request parameter. So our string, our URL, and then we're going to use the model to go ahead and add an attribute. So we're logging the URL that was requested. We're adding that to the attribute because in the fragment, website.html, we use that URL. And then what we'll do is we'll get that, we'll basically get that back, that just that HTML that we care about. And we have to add it somewhere, right? So the way that we do that, we saw this in the last one. We want to set an HX target. So target is equal to our iframe container. And then how do we want to swap that out? So HX swap is equal to, and we're going to use the outer HTML. So let's go ahead and rerun that and head over to the browser. And I'll go to O2, and now we have our URL, and I put in a default value of my website. So if we go ahead and click on load, we should see it load down here. That is great. Now let's go ahead and change this to something else. Spring.io. Well, maybe it doesn't like the cross site. Let's see, springio.net. And there we go. Cool. So that is demo number 2. Pretty exciting. Again, none of these are like terribly groundbreaking, but what we're doing is we're learning a lot of the basics, the fundamentals, using these different attributes. And again, all of this can be found in the HTMX website documentation. But I thought these were some good examples to kind of learn some of this stuff. So with that, let's move on to demo number 3. All right, so we're going to take a look at demo number 3, which is loading more contacts. This example demonstrates how to load more contacts using HTMX. The initial page load returns index.html like we've been doing, but it only contains 3 contacts. When you click the load contacts button, a call is made to the contacts controller to request the next 3 contacts. The response is then inserted into the DOM using HTMX. Again, we're not refreshing the entire page. We're just kind of getting some HTML back and inserting that into the DOM. So let's look at how this might work. So number 3, go in here and we're going to go to the contacts controller. So the first thing you'll notice is we have this dependency on something called a faker. So if you look in the pom.xml, I've included this dependency. I've done a video, probably a few on this in the past. And this is a way to just get fake data. So I want to get a bunch of contacts, but I don't want to just like type in some gibberish. I want some like actual contact info. This is a really great library for faking data. So I get an instance of this through a constructor injection. I probably set this up somewhere. I'm not sure where. Yeah, there it is. So I create an instance of faker there, and I get it here. So let's look at what we have here. So we have this list, which will return the index. So this is the root. This is going to say, I'm going to add an attribute name here called contacts, and it calls this create contacts method, which just creates 3. So that is the first one. So if we look at number 3 and we look at the index, we can see we have a title, a description, there's a load contacts button, and then down here I have a table with some header rows, and I have our contacts rows. So this includes name, email, and ID. And so what this is saying is do a replace with a contact row. And this is our fragment here. So this is what's going to get replaced with. So the first time we load 3, the next time we call it, we want to call this load method, which is basically going to create 3 more and use that fragment to create some HTML that we can go ahead and insert into the DOM. And again, it just has the contact name, email, and ID. And that contact is coming from a record. That's how we're representing a contact here. So we need to make this work. We need to, when we click the load contacts button, somehow call that endpoint and insert that here. But we don't want to like replace this, right? Because we probably already have 3 contacts there. We basically want to append to it. So let's look at how we can do this. So I think in our button here, we are going to do a couple of things. So the first that I want to do is I want to say hxget. I want to make a call to /contacts/load. What is the target? Where am I targeting this? So target is equal to, if we go down here, we see tbody ID equals rows. So I'm going to say rows. And then hxswap, what are we doing with this? We don't want to do the outer HTML because, again, that would like replace everything. So this is going back to, you really want to take a look at the documentation and look at what swaps are available for you. In this case, I want to say before end. So before the end of this would basically give me another row. And that's what this defines, is a row of data. So I think this is going to work. Let's go ahead and rerun our application and go back to the browser. And I'll go over to /contacts, and now I get this list. So I have the list. Here's 3 that loaded right away. If I click the button, nothing happens. Let's find out what happened wrong. 500 from contacts/load. So let's figure that out. So contacts/load, that's this one. Ooh, I moved some things around and that is not what we want. So let's go ahead and rerun that and reload this. And now every time we click it, we basically get 3 random contacts and it just gets appended to the end. All right, so now we are here on our final demo, which is number 4, add a new contact. It says coming soon because I haven't really flushed this out all the way, but I think the bare bones stuff is there to get you going. But this example demonstrates how to add a new contact using HTMX. The initial page loads returns, that should be wrong. That'll be 04/index.html. which contains the initial list of users. When you click on the Add User button, a modal window will open up with a form allowing you to add a new user. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at this. So if we go into number 4, this is going to be the user controller, and the user controller is using a repository to kind of save information. We have a user controller. The index will return the index. Again, we got to kind of update this. So that is going to be /04. And what that's going to do is call the user repositories find all method to return to all of the users. There's a couple endpoints in here to add user modal. So this pulls up the modal. So that is 04 modal. And if we look in 04, you'll see the modal. This contains like the modal window. And then we have get fake user. If we want to get a fake user, again, let's update all of these, Dan, to make the right ones. And then we have a save, which will basically save a new user. So this returns 04 new user form, which is the form that's going to be contained inside of the modal window. So let's take a look at how we can make this work. All right, so in here we have this users. Here's a list of users. We have a button. This button is for adding a new user. So this is kind of where we will add some interactivity. And then we have our list of users. So this is going to iterate over all the users in our system. So the first thing we need to do is be able to add some kind of click handler here to like open up that modal window. So what we're going to do is we're going to say hx get, and what are we going to get? We're going to get the users add user modal. Let's double check that. If we go back into here and go into user controller, we have an add user modal, which is basically going to return 04 modal. And that is our fragment that contains the modal window. So we have a fragment called modal, and then this is displaying a modal window with some form stuff inside of there. So we have that. That should give us what we need there. Now we need to target this. Where are we adding this to? So we're going to say hx target. And the way a modal window works, I'm going to target the body. So that is going to add it to the body. And then where in the body do I want it? I want to go ahead and swap this out before end. So let's just see if we can get that modal window working. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the browser. And this time I will go to /04. And this is probably because we have something screwed up there again. 04 index, 04 index, that looks pretty good. Oh, users. So we want to go to users. Sorry. And now we have our list of users. So we have 3 users here. Now what we want to do is click on this add user and hopefully open up a modal window. And there it is. Cool. So far, so good. Now we need to do something in this add new user form. All right, so we get this modal back, and I just want to add something here to kind of load some data so we don't have to fill it out every time. I have that fake users endpoint. So I think what I'll do here is on, I think I have a get fake user. Let me go back to the browser. Yeah, so I have add fake data. Let's do that right there on a... And I'm going to add an hx get to /users/get fake user. And then we'll go ahead and say hx target is going to be my new form. So form new user. And then how do I want to swap that out? I'm going to just say the outer HTML, right? So let's see what that does. Let's go ahead and rerun that. Head back to the browser, reload this, click add new user, add some fake data. Nope. Let's see what's going wrong there. HTML target error. Okay, I mean HTMX target error. So FRM new user. Yeah, that would not be right. I need the ID, not just the name. So let's go ahead and reload that and add new user and add fake data and go ahead and save, but that save doesn't work yet. So the next step would be to really add the save to this. And so I don't have that yet, but I don't think that's anything very interesting when it comes to HTMX, because I think what I would do here in this instance is the save would actually just post to that save method and then return, and then I would do a page reload there. So the interactivity that I'm basically adding using HTMX is the idea of popping up this dialog box and adding fake data. The save button, I would probably just send a full page refresh, and then that way, once I save it, I'm basically redirecting back to the index anyway, and loading all of the context that are in my repository. So I think we can call that demo partial success. If you want to go ahead and finish that out, that's fine by me. All right, I hope you enjoyed that introduction to HTMX in Spring with Thymeleaf. Now, we didn't get into it, but there are other template engines out there, and this will work with most of those template engines. So if you have a preference for a template engine, that's perfectly fine. I kind of like Thymeleaf because they call it a natural processing template engine, meaning even if you don't have something there, these are still HTML templates that you can hand off to a designer and have them work on them. So this was a lot of fun. This was just getting our feet wet. This is kind of the introduction to HTMX. I'd love to hear from you. Are you using HTMX? If so, what are you doing with it? If you're not using HTMX and this is kind of your introduction into it, and you like what you see, what would you like to see next? I'd like to kind of explore this topic a little bit more. Maybe just start building some different components or different parts of an application, and maybe we'll lead up to like building a full-fledged application. So with that, you know what time it is, friends. If you found value in this, do me a big favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.